We got our guys. So let's go out to the River Islands guest line where we got our guest, Jim Bowden of The Athletic, former general manager of the Reds and Expos/Nationals. Very glad to have you on this morning, Jim. And we've been talking a lot about Tony Vitello this morning. And I don't know if you saw his ejection yesterday with his back and forth with Mike Estabrook and Lance Barrett there. Just the conversation we were kind of having is that's a moment where you maybe need to go off a little bit more on the umpire and kind of put your mark on that moment there, maybe show a little bit more fire in defending your players and Willy Adames with that tag. When you saw that ejection yesterday, Jim, just kind of what was going through your mind in terms of how Tony went about it?
Yeah, look, this has been a tough year for Tony Vitello, Sam and Joe, as you guys know. It's not easy, and I'm not going to break down an ejection and how you should act. Look, I grew up in the era where, Billy Martin and Lou Piniella and Earl Weaver were putting on shows, and this generation, we don't get that same thing. I feel for what Tony and the Giants have gone through this year. It's been a complete nightmare that doesn't seem to get better, and what happens is we end up picking apart these kind of things when you have a year like this because nobody can do anything right. The popcorn vendor can't even cook the popcorn properly. So it's one of those things. I don't make a big deal out of it.
Well, then go back in time. Why were you so against bringing him in the first place?
Inexperience. This is someone that had never been in professional ball at any capacity, not even as an intern in an office. And I think Major League Baseball is a little bit more difficult than that. And so, look, I like him a lot. I was rooting for him. I think he's a good person. I got to meet him during the winter meetings. I like him. I don't think he was ready to be a Major League manager, and I think we've seen that on the field. I think we've seen that with his decisions. He's going to get to learn at the big league level. Not a lot of people will ever get the opportunity to learn at the Major League level how to manage. So it's been an incredible experience for him. I'm sure he'll learn from it and be better for it next year. But I was opposed to it just because there's a big difference between college baseball and Major League Baseball. The players are different to handle. The preparation is different. And so, to me, that's why I didn't like the hire at the time because of that. But you know what? He was put in a situation where it seems like every night he's getting to learn something, and he'll be better for it next year.
So let me follow that up with, Buster Posey's role in all of this. Is Posey's initial, mistake trying to go outside the box and outside of Major League Baseball? Or is it maybe not supporting him or having a team that wasn't so veteran-laden?
Yeah, look, I think when you have a year like this, we have enough blame that can go around to everybody, and everybody needs to take responsibility for their role in that. Right. Whoever is managing this Giants team wasn't going to win anyway. Right. So there is a core to work from. Right. You had three good starters this year in Logan Webb, Robbie Ray, and Landon Roop. That's something certainly you can build around. Offensively, you've got four guys to build around, and Devers, Schmidt, Adames, and Eldridge. You didn't get the most out of all of them. I'm not going to point to just managers and coaches. I always say players need responsibility too, but I do think that field staff had something to do with the slow start that they all got and some of the player slumps that lasted longer than they should have. That's just my opinion from afar. But there is a core to build around. The problem is it wasn't a deep roster. The bottom half of the lineup's not good enough. The bottom half of the rotation, you're not even in those games. You're in the games when your three starters are going, and then when you get Malley and Hauser in the back end, you don't have much of a chance to win. So look, it's not a good team. It's been a nightmare. So now the fun part is let's go fix it. Let's turn it around, and this trade deadline is going to be important for Buster Posey and his front office in trying to take advantage of a seller's market and a chance to kind of turn this around a little bit for the Giants. So let's see what they can do here over the next 10 days.
Got Jim Bowden here of The Athletic joining us here on the Morning Roast, courtesy of the River Islands guest line. And Jim, you mentioned a minute ago that Tony's learning a lot from the mistakes that he's making this year. He's learning a lot that will kind of serve him going into next year. We've been kind of trying to make the case this morning. Why do you bring Tony Vitello back next year? Do you, think the Giants should still bring Tony back next year, or is he a one and done? And what would be, the reason, in your opinion, that the Giants would want to bring him back next year?
Well, I mean, when you put him in this position, you put him in a position to fail to begin with. So why if you put him in this position because you thought he was going to win this year, then I don't understand that decision at all. So I guess that's where I'm at. I'm like, okay, if you're hiring him, then you're hiring him for the long term. You're willing to take the pain and suffering it's going to take to be a rookie manager with no professional experience. So, I mean, it's going to be pretty difficult if you don't bring him back. Then why'd you hire him in the first place? That makes no sense to me. If you're not going to bring him back, why didn't you fire him when it was a mess 2 months ago? That's why I kind of feel like, Buster is dedicated to him. He's going to do everything he can to make him be successful as a big league manager. He's going through the growing pains now to eventually be able to say in 2 or 3 years, you see, I hired the right guy. So that's why I think he's going to bring him back. I think he's going to concentrate more on building this baseball team back up and giving him a team that can win. And then by then, hoping that he's developed and learned enough to win with that team when it's ready to win.
So sticking on this developing and learning theme here, when you're looking at Tony right now, have you noticed anything or is anything jumping out to you in terms of just signs that show that Tony is growing and learning and getting better as a manager, even just in this season, despite the fact that so much is still going wrong?
It's really difficult from afar to give that judgment. As you know, I was a GM for 17 years, and I got to be in the clubhouse. I got to be on the field. I got to be there to really understand. I got to be talking to the players to really comprehend what's going on behind the scenes, not just during the game. Mm-hmm. I mean, so I guess it would be unfair for me to kind of make that judgment.
Well, then Jim, I don't mean to interrupt you, but when did you know then during your tenure? I'm sure it was different each time. When did you know it was time to move on from a manager?
Yeah, so it's different in every single case, right? I mean, sometimes you're with a team and the vibe and the pulse isn't going to work, and everybody's on edge. I'm not going to use my specific examples, but I'll use other people's examples. When Dave Dombrowski fired Joe Girardi, it was because that Phillies clubhouse was so tense that the players weren't performing for him. So he fired him. He brought in Rob Thompson, and Rob Thompson goes ahead and takes the Phillies to the World Series that year. So that's the feel. Other times you make a change because, you don't like the way he's handling a pitching staff, or you don't like his strategies, or he's lost the clubhouse. I mean, it's different. Every single managerial change comes with different reasons and purposes. But when you make a change, you better make sure the next guy coming in is going to win more games than the guy you're letting go.
Yeah.
And obviously when you do make a change, that's why you're doing it, because you believe someone else coming in managing the same group is going to do better.
So really well said. You said that the trade deadline, you were actually looking forward to if you were in Buster's shoes, because it's an opportunity to make things right. I'm paraphrasing there. If you had a chance to sit down with Buster and talk to him, and this is just a hypothetical, what would be a successful trade deadline that you would explain to him that he has to do?
Yeah, I would. I mean, first of all, if I sat down with him, I would have to ask him and go through the entire roster and say, okay, when you've been out there, has there been any interest in Devers, Adames, Chapman, your big contract players? And if so, what kind of interest have you had? And then I would ask him if Robbie Ray and Luis Ariz are two players he wanted to bring back. And if so, how have those negotiations gone to extend them? And then I would ask him what are the teams that are interested in there? Who are your targets from each of those teams? And try to get the lay of the land of what the process is. I mean, they should be pretty far down the road in terms of knowing what teams have interest in what players, who they're targeting from each club. And then I would want to go through all of the either prospects or young major league players that they're targeting, and then be grilling him on who those players are, what the upside is on those players, and the reasoning behind all of it. I mean, obviously this is it's a very intense time. It's a very important time. Sellers markets are extremely it's just as important as if you're buying at the deadline. As a GM, I did both, right? There was one trade deadline where I traded for 3 starting pitchers in a week: David Wells, Mark Portugal, and Dave Burba. Then there was where I sold, where I traded Jeff Shaw for Paul Konerko. So every deadline is different, but the key is to take advantage of it, because the best trades that are always made for a team will happen at the deadline, where there's leverage and where there's time constraints and where GMs have the most pressure, either to buy or to sell. The most pressure is August 3rd at 6 p.m. You won't get that any other time of the year. And a chance to get a lopsided trade is always now, because there's going to be buyers where GMs and presidents' jobs are on the line and they have to win and they have to get that pitcher. They have to get that pitcher, and the pitchers aren't out there. The Tigers aren't trading Skubal. The Twins aren't trading Ryan, and Robbie Ray is sitting there. And you got to maximize. You have to win that trade. It shouldn't be an even trade. The team that's trying to win should have to overpay for your guy, and that's a chance to get your organization better. So we would just be having those discussions thoroughly. And then I'd really want to know who he trusts in the room, from the scouts to the analytic people to the advisors that he's had. I mean, he's got a lot of people around him that have won world championships, including Bruce Bochy and Dusty Baker, that know how to win and have done it. Both of them are going to the Hall of Fame. I would make sure that their brain power is being utilized at this time of year, and the experience that they have on that side of things.
I love that answer. Mark Portugal, that's a name that I haven't heard in years.
I heard of Jeff Shaw in there too.
Yeah, Giant and Astro. And Dave Burba was a good relief man for the Giants. It was like a 5th, 6th starter for them at times. Those were some way back names. Adames, Chapman, Devers. I mean, I've heard from some people they're untradeable. And then I hear from other people, given the landscape or the uncertainty of the lockout, we don't know if teams will take on, won't take on extra money. Will it be godfathered in? How much is this conversation about trading those guys also a conversation with the ownership group about how much to pay down? Because that feels like a factor in if or can they move some of these deals.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you get down to, what it's going to take to do a deal, what's the return going to be? The return determines how much I'm willing to pay down, right? I'll pay it down if the return warrants it. So, look, you've already put on your books that you have to pay Devers, Adames, and Chapman. You already know that. You have to pay that regardless. You have to look at it that way. What can I get back for them, and how much do I have to pay down to get it? Because remember, if you're acquiring younger players that are making a third of the money that they're making, you're going to pay that anyway. And whether you're paying it to the guys you're trading or put it towards the guys that are coming in, it's the same thing. You've already committed those dollars. So how much do you pay down? I think you make the best deal you can, and then you go to ownership and you say, this is what I can get back, but to get this back, I have to pay it down by this much, and I recommend doing it, and this is why I recommend doing it. And you get to that point. Now, when people say not tradable, I heard that my whole life, and those not tradable guys always seem to get traded anyway. So there's always a way to trade. There just is. I'm sorry. People eat contracts. Now, the timing isn't always the way you want it. Maybe Rafael Devers isn't tradable right now, but maybe in the offseason he is, or next July he is. These things change all the time. And remember, it only takes one team out of the other 29 to make those deals. So, if you look at the Boston Red Sox, they were won 15 of 16, and they really need a bat. I mean, are you sure at the end of the day Craig Breslow won't take Willy Adames? There isn't a deal to be made somewhere where he can trade you one of his young starters for Adames, and you got to pay it down, and that pay down is enough to make it worthwhile to get a young starter that you don't have to pay for 3 years. I mean, there are deals that will be out there. When you work hard enough and you grind those phones and texts, you'll be surprised that a lot of times in baseball, the untradeable becomes traded.
What about Logan Webb? Well, what's the view on that? I mean, it seems like if you were resetting or at least trying to get the best haul and win a trade, boy, doesn't it start with someone like him?
I understand why they don't want to trade him, and I would have the same position in there, but I'd always listen, right? I think it's your responsibility to listen on everybody and do your due diligence. And the thing that I always thought sitting in that seat, honestly, everybody's tradable at the right price, right? I mean, you guys have the great gig you're doing right now, and just say you're really happy, But if I sat there and quadrupled your salary and said, you got to move to Miami, but I'm going to pay you 4 times, and you say no, and I say, okay, I'll pay you 10 times. There is a price where you'll get an airplane and come down here. You will move. There is.
My wife will make me move.
Yeah, and it's the same thing with a trade. If somebody wants to overwhelm me with Logan Webb, I'm going to trade Logan Webb. It's okay. If I can rebuild my franchise, I am going to absolutely do that. So I wouldn't want to trade Logan Webb, but I would listen in case somebody wants to make me an offer that I can't say no to.
Jim Bowden.
That's kind of how I view that.
So Jim Bowden here of The Athletic joining us. One more here for you, Jim. You mentioned possibly Adames and the Red Sox, but when it comes to Chapman, Devers, and still Adames as well, if I'm looking around the league trying to figure out what team might be willing to bite on one of those 3 or any of those 3, just what are some of the teams that you think might actually be willing to try and jump on one of those big 3 deals?
Well, I'd love to be able to give you a name, but I don't have one. And I do try to stay in touch with all the teams. So I can't tell you that I've heard anyone that I've interest. In fact, when I run those names out there, I've had teams tell me, Casey Smith's the guy we'd like instead. Right. And understandably so. Does he have 20 home runs and hitting 270 and can play 4 positions? So I totally get that that's there. So to answer you honestly, I've not heard one team say, hey, we'd love to be able to pry Devers, Adames, or Chapman from them. I have not heard that. I've got to be honest with you.